The mud is boiling. Not from heat alone, though the heat down here is enough to warp steel. The drilling mud is erupting upward with hydrogen gas, a gas that has no business being this far inside the Earth. The engineers on the surface trade glances. Something is wrong with their models. Or perhaps something is right about the planet and wrong about everything they thought they knew. Picture this. You drill into the Earth, and it bleeds. Gas, water, fossils. Everything scientists expected fell apart. This is the story of the hole that proved the world was wrong. The year is 1970. The location is the Kola Peninsula in the far northwest of the Soviet Union, where the land bleeds into the Arctic and the sky stays pale for months at a time. A drill bit has just begun chewing into ancient rock. It will not stop for 25 years, and what it finds along the way will quietly shatter some of the most confident assumptions in the history of science.
How deep does the world go before it stops being your world? To understand what drove the Soviet Union to puncture the very skin of the Earth, you have to understand the Cold War not just as a military contest, but as a contest of ideas and of firsts. The Americans had put a man in space. The Americans had gone to the moon. And so the Soviets turned their ambitions in the other direction, downward, into the dark. The program was conceived in the 1960s, a decade when the boundary between the audacious and the impossible felt gloriously thin. Soviet scientists had identified something tantalizing in the data from seismic surveys, signals suggesting that the deep crust behaved in ways no one fully understood. The Baltic Shield, that ancient slab of rock beneath the Kola Peninsula, was estimated to run about 35 kilometers deep. They wouldn't reach the bottom, but they would try to go far enough to see what no human instrument had ever seen.
The original plan was modest. 7,000 meters, just over 4 miles below the surface. A purpose-built drilling rig, the Uralmash, was brought in and modified for the job. The target depth was later reset to 15,000 meters, nearly 10 miles down, and the rig was renamed accordingly. The name was a kind of declaration, a dare laid down against the planet itself. Drilling began on the 24th of May, 1970. Slowly, steadily, they went down. 1 meter, then 10, then 100, then 1,000. The drill string, the long, segmented column of pipe that transmitted torque from the surface machinery all the way to the cutting head below, grew longer each day. The work was precise, painstaking, and unglamorous. Crews rotated, seasons changed. The Arctic sun made its slow circuits above the tree line. For 9 years, they drilled in silence, through Arctic winters, one pipe at a time. Then, they broke the deepest drilling record in history, and almost no one knew it had happened. By 1979, they had drilled deeper than any human-made hole in history, surpassing a record previously held by an oil well in Oklahoma, 9,583 meters. And they kept going. Picture what that means physically. The Eiffel Tower stands 300 meters tall. Stack 40 of them end to end, reaching from the ground into the lower atmosphere, and you still haven't matched the depth of the Kola borehole. The hole itself is barely 23 centimeters wide, narrower than a dinner plate. And then, somewhere around 7 kilometers down, the first surprise arrived. The scientists had predicted, based on seismic wave data, that the crust would transition from granite to basalt at roughly that depth. This was accepted science. It was in the textbooks. The seismic signals were clear and consistent. Basalt, they said. It will be basalt. It was not basalt. The drill found more granite. Deeper and deeper. More granite.
Here's what made this discovery so shocking. Geologists thought they'd found the boundary between granite and basalt. They hadn't. The rock never changed. Pressure changed its behavior. Same rock, different physics. They'd been reading the Earth completely wrong. The seismic discontinuity that everyone had measured, that everyone had interpreted as a rock-type boundary, it turned out to be something else entirely. A metamorphic transition. A change in the state of the rock, rather than a change in what the rock was made of. Two very different things, with two very different implications. The Earth had answered a question by rendering the question itself wrong. And then came the water. Between 3 and 6 kilometers below the surface, the team found pools of water. Free water, mobile water, water that had no right to exist under that kind of pressure and that kind of heat. The accepted understanding was that at such depths, any water would be sealed away in crystalline structures or simply vaporized. But this water had been percolating upward through the granite for perhaps billions of years, rising until it hit a layer of impermeable rock above it and collecting there, pooling in the dark, waiting. The drilling mud, the fluid pumped down the hole to lubricate the drill and carry rock chips back to the surface, came back up saturated with hydrogen gas. The engineers described it as boiling, not with heat, with gas. The Earth was breathing something unexpected, something that pointed toward chemical processes deep in the crust that science had barely begun to theorize. And then, 6 kilometers down, in rock that had been sealed away from the surface for longer than complex life has existed on Earth, the researchers found fossils. Microscopic plankton. 24 distinct species, their outlines preserved in the ancient stone. Organisms from an ocean that no longer existed, entombed in rock, pulled back into the light of a world they could never have imagined. The temperature, too, defied prediction. Scientists had expected temperatures to remain relatively moderate, perhaps 100 degrees Celsius at depth. Instead, by the time the fourth borehole was abandoned in 1992, the rock at around 12 kilometers had reached 180 degrees Celsius. That is hot enough to melt lead. The rock itself behaved more like a plastic than a rigid solid, slowly deforming under the heat and pressure. The drill wanted to go further. The planet refused. On the 27th of September, 1984, the drill string twisted and snapped 5 kilometers below the surface. A 5-kilometer section of pipe, lost forever in the dark. The team had to restart from 7,000 meters, beginning a new branch. They were patient people. The Earth swallowed 5 kilometers of drill pipe. Most people would have given up. These scientists started over and kept drilling for another 8 years. By 1989, after 19 years of drilling, they reached 12,262 meters, just over 12 kilometers, over 40,000 feet, the record that still stands today. Then the Soviet Union began to fall apart. Funding, which had always been a quiet anxiety at the back of every scientist's mind, became an acute crisis. The fourth hole was stopped mid-drill in 1992. The fifth was halted in 1994 when the money simply ran out. The scientific team, the people who had given decades of their lives to this project, was transferred to a smaller subsidiary and given the task of studying what had already been retrieved. In 2007, that team was dissolved. The equipment was transferred to a private company and partially scrapped. In 2008, the company was liquidated. It rewrote textbooks, discovered the impossible. Then it ran out of money and was cut apart for scrap. That's a heartbreaking end for one of humanity's greatest scientific achievements. The site was abandoned. Today, if you travel to the Kola Peninsula and find the place, you will encounter a rusted metal cap bolted over a hole barely wide enough to lower a basketball into. The buildings around it are crumbling. Grass grows through the concrete. the Arctic wind moves through the empty frames of what were once laboratories and control rooms. There is no monument. There is no museum. There is only the cap.
What was learned here echoes forward in ways that are easy to miss. The discovery that seismic signals can be misread, that what we think we see in wave data does not always match the physical reality below, reshaped how geologists model the interior of the planet. The discovery of water at depth transformed our understanding of where water exists on Earth and how it moves through rock over geological time. The fossils found 6 kilometers down expanded the map of where life can leave its mark. And the extreme temperatures encountered, far higher than models predicted, forced scientists to revise their thermal models of the crust. Every revision rippled outward. China began drilling a new super-deep borehole in 2023. They reached 10,000 meters in early 2024. The race has resumed, quietly, without much fanfare, in a desert basin in Xinjiang. The questions the Kola borehole left unanswered are still waiting.
But Kola isn't the end of this story. China is drilling even deeper. And if history repeats itself, the discoveries that shocked scientists decades ago may be about to surprise us again.
But here is what strikes you most when you sit with the full story of this place. The Kola Superdeep Borehole was not defeated by the planet. It was defeated by money, by politics, by the slow collapse of the civilization that built it. 12 kilometers down, the rock was still yielding. The drill could have gone further, given time and funding and the will to continue. The planet did not stop us. We stopped ourselves.
There is something uncomfortable in that. We live on the surface of a world we have never truly entered. We have mapped the seafloor and the atmosphere and the surfaces of other planets. We have sent machines past the edge of the solar system. But the ground beneath your feet, right now, a few kilometers down, it becomes genuinely unknown territory. We scratched at it once, with a thread of steel barely wider than a dinner plate, and what we found shook our most confident assumptions.
A thread of steel, barely wider than a dinner plate. 12 kilometers, 25 years. And it permanently rewrote what we thought we knew about the inside of the planet we've lived on for our entire species' existence. Imagine what we'd find if we actually tried. So the question that the Kola borehole leaves you with is not really about drilling. It is about humility, and about the particular kind of courage it takes to go looking for what you do not know. The planet kept its secrets for billions of years. We had 12 kilometers of pipe and 25 years of effort. What else is down there, waiting?
We drilled deeper than anyone ever had, discovered things that rewrote geology. Then, we forgot about it. If that's your kind of story, subscribe, because history is full of discoveries the world stopped talking about.